Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a special car edition of Ending Physician Overwhelm. This episode will air the Tuesday after Memorial Day weekend and currently recording on Saturday morning. And I just have this ridiculous idea that I want to talk about, but more than just the ridiculous idea, it's what could it lead to? And what's really important. So here is my $1 million ridiculous idea. A few weeks ago, maybe a month now, I used a continuous glucose monitor just to play around with it. As many of you know, I do family and obesity medicine, and so a lot of my patients are interested in continuous glucose monitors, and I was able to get a free trial through the company because that's the kind of ridiculous privilege, right, that we get sometimes. And it was really interesting. It was interesting to see where my blood sugar went up and down. Now, I don't have diabetes. I don't have pre-diabetes. I don't have any signs of blood sugar issues. And people in my family don't either, which is quite remarkable, really. But it was interesting to see what happened and what would take my blood sugars up and what wouldn't affect them, and just sort of notice some trends. And as a primary care physician, the question I often get asked is, can you check my cortisol levels? Can you check my cortisol levels? My nutritionist said you should check my cortisol levels. And I am not a functional medicine person. I am not a lifestyle medicine person. I am not someone who uses cortisol testing because I don't find it very helpful. And my spiel to people is, we can check a random cortisol level. We can check a morning fasting cortisol level, and more likely than not, it's going to be, kind of in this range. It's probably not going to be super low. It's probably not going to be super high, right? There's no signs of Cushing. There's no signs of, adrenal cortical insufficiency, blah, 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 blah. And I asked them, do you need a cortisol test to be able to see whether or not you're stressed? When I ask people that, they kind of laugh a little bit and they're like, well, no. And my question is, okay, if we check your cortisol level and it's normal, but you're stressed, what are you going to do with that data? And conversely, if you felt totally relaxed and your cortisol level was high normal or like just over the edge, nothing, no signs of Cushing's, no signs of, like, what are you going to do with that information, right? It is a test that doesn't, to me, have a lot of utility. But here's my $1 million idea, and you're welcome to steal this. And please give my name out as credit. But I would be interested in a continuous cortisol monitor, right? A wearable device, just like our CGMs, that would be able to track your cortisol. And here's why. If you could see where your levels are and where they go up to, and be able to track that with the things that go on in your life, it would force you to pay attention to the many stressors and many contributors to outcomes in your health that you are not happy with. Your low degree of sleep, for example, the way that you are constantly fueling yourself with coffee or, other stimulants of various types, the way that you're eating, the way that you are not exercising, or sometimes the way that you're overemphasizing some aspects of exercise, but not really getting what we would hope would be a cortisol drop, right? An overall leveling out of cortisol. It's not really, I think, that any of us really needs to see that data, other than if you see it, if it is in your face, if you have objective data that you can point to and say, this is kind of high, and I can see all these spikes, and I can see how overall my cortisol levels are high. And yeah, that feels pretty true with the way that I'm living my life. Then you could use that as a sign, you know what, you're right, I do need to make some changes. I do need to be doing things differently. And that's probably at the micro day-to-day level, different choices that you could be making, but it might also be at the macro, right? It might be that the way that you're working, the place that you're working, the number of hours that you're working, the true circumstances of what you are doing is not a good fit for you. That is a very true reality for many people. And I don't like people to just jump into a different role or to just cut their hours with no plan, because we really need to attend to what is the ultimate goal here. We can't just escape what we think is harming us outside of, yes, truly toxic, awful, dangerous work situations. And there are some of those, right? But for most of us, we are working in environments that would like us to overwork, would like us to constantly be self-sacrificing, in the name of patient care, in the name of great access, in the name of HEDIS scores and Press Ganey scores, and all of these things that make them look good, but they don't actually pay us more. They don't actually give us back the time that we spend after hours charting, right? They don't really compensate us appropriately for the extra work. They just imply, really, that this is the way that we ought to work. And because we tend to be people pleasers, because we want to take care of people, because we are in the room hearing people's story, witnessing their pain and suffering, right? We often just continue to believe that we need to keep doing things this way and that it's an us problem, that we are not efficient, that we are not effective at doing our jobs, that we should just be charting and typing faster and we should be able to manage it, when it is often an undoable amount of work, right? If you are continuing to believe that you are not enough and you are functioning in a broken healthcare system that literally profits from you overworking without actually compensating you for that work, this is such a setup. We've talked about that many times before. But if you could see in an objective, data-driven way how that was affecting you through this one metric of being able to see your cortisol levels, that might really force you to sit down with yourself and say, what am I doing here? Because I don't think we need to argue. Although I find a random fasting cortisol test not to be that helpful, anything that points out to us that we are not living in a good balance, that we are not taking good care of ourselves, is something that I would find useful. I don't think a fasting cortisol helps us with that. I do think a continuous cortisol monitor, where you could see over a 2 to 4 week span, what is the impact of my day-to-day choices and the ways that I'm working and the ways that I'm always giving to others, what is the impact of this? Because we have lots of data, right, on how high cortisol levels affect our health. It affects our blood sugars. It affects our inflammation levels, right? You know the impact of low sleep. You know the impact of abnormal blood sugars, maybe not to the extent that you could really internalize it, but let's be very clear. This would be an excellent way for you to see objective data. You know what? The way that I'm working and giving so much of myself is harmful. It is harming me. I recently saw a Facebook post from someone, and I'm sorry I didn't get her name, who will be on Kevin MD podcast, talking about how patient care is better if you have a woman physician, but that woman physician's health is worse for having so many patients. Something to that effect. And it's so true, because women physicians tend to provide safer, more comprehensive care. We have better surgical and hospital outcomes. We tend to talk through options more. We tend to get asked more questions. There are all sorts of data on that. And we are not getting compensated extra for that quality of care. And more often, if we are asking for more help and support, we are being told, nope, you can't do that. You can't have that. We can't treat you special. We can't treat you any differently than anyone else. And if you don't do this, we're going to accuse you of not being a team player. How does that work for your cortisol levels, my friends, right? So it is an institutionalization of our sacrifice, of our overwork. And I'm just so over it because we need to be able to take good care of ourselves, not only for our very human selves, but also to be able to sustain the quality of care that we are going to provide to all the humans. If all of the women physicians walked out the door, left their jobs, due to burnout, due to saying, I can't do this anymore, left medicine, what a disaster, what a heartbreak, what a loss for all of our patients. Can you imagine? I don't anticipate that happening, and I'm not advocating for that. But what I am advocating for is for you learning how to take better care of yourself. Not because you are a terrible human being who sucks at it, but because you have been conditioned not to take care of yourself. You have been conditioned to always put work first. You have been conditioned to put extra effort in to make everything go smoothly for other people. You have been conditioned to step up when others are not available for the routine support they are supposed to be providing you in order to take care of patients, right? How many of us have been in work situations where we are supposed to have an MA, we are supposed to have RNs on our team, and those folks are not there because of absences, because they have left or been fired or laid off, and those positions not replaced. That is something that happened definitely in my prior organization outside of the pandemic, but it got so much worse for so many of us, right? So if you're suddenly cleaning the rooms and rooming your own patients, do you know what you don't have time to do? You don't have time to see extra patients. You don't have time to answer all their questions. You don't have time to take a goddamn break. All right, getting a little fired up here. It is so critical that you see the ways in which the system has worked on us, that you be able to step back, that you be able to recognize that there is no business case for them to change their tactic, but that you decide, one, how are you going to interact with the system? Are you going to choose to stay in the system? Are you going to choose to leave the system and do something else outside of medicine entirely? Are you going to choose to, step out and into some kind of alternate care model, direct primary care, direct specialty care, some other situation than whatever it is that you're doing, right? So that's one part. But the other part is, how are you going to take care of yourself at the day-to-day and in the big picture? Are you moving your body? Are you giving yourself healthy, balanced nutrition? Or are you grabbing donuts and cold coffee out of the break room any chance you get? Or if you're in pediatrics, right, are you eating goldfish crackers, out of the snacks bin because that's all you feel like you have time for? This is not okay. And there's times in your life when probably that was really necessary. Think to residency and med school where you were just constantly scavenging whatever you could find. We have to leave that pattern, because if you do that for years and years and years and years, guess what, my friends? You will not be healthy. You will be in terrible shape, right? And we can't continue to do that. So just imagine for a moment that you had a continuous cortisol monitor. What would you be seeing in your day-to-day? And how would you choose to respond to it? Now, I remember, just talking about all the wearables today, I remember my first Fitbit that was able to track sleep. And I believe I had that when I was delivering babies, right? So getting up with my pager. But I also had young children, so I was also sometimes getting out of bed, right, to attend to them. And I remember getting readings, and my Fitbit little tracker sort of app thing would tell me, you don't sleep very well. You don't sleep long enough. You have a lot of interruptions. And I turned it off. I was like, you know what? I know that. That's not very helpful. At the time, I did not feel like there was absolutely anything that I could do about it. And right now, I can look back and I can question that. Yeah, I'm going to get up, in certain circumstances. Could I have done things differently to prioritize my sleep? Yeah, I'm sure that I probably could have, but at the time, I just had no idea. But if we're going into an experiment like a continuous cortisol monitor, I'm just going to pretend that this is a device that exists. What is the point of doing that? The point of doing that is being able to see some objective data that shows you that the way that you're doing things now is probably not helpful. Now, until someone goes out and invents this device, we don't have it. But if you can imagine, what would I notice if I was wearing this? How do you think you would do? If you are already taking good care of yourself, if you are already getting some movement, if you are already prioritizing sleep, if you are already eating balanced nutrition, you may find that this is not a very helpful exercise because you may see it spike, in response to sort of normal things like, yes, your pager going off. And you could say, yeah, no, I know that my heart rate goes up when my pager goes off. So it's no surprise, right, that I have a cortisol spike. But if you could see that your baseline was high, that, it spikes up, that after a night where you only slept 4 hours because you were up late charting, or, kind of any sort of patterns that correlate with what you are or are not doing for your health, what would you do with that data? My hope is that you would look at this and you would have that heart to heart with yourself and say, self, I love you. I understand that you struggle with this because you've been taught to ignore your body. You can't ignore your body anymore. It's not okay for you to continue to ignore your health. It's not okay for you to say, I will take care of myself when all these other things are done, when I've taken care of all the other people, whether at home or at work or both, right? It's probably both. It's not okay to continue to ignore myself. We get away with that when we're younger because our bodies are different. We stop getting away with that when we do that for years and years and years. And because time only flows in one direction, right? We are getting older and older. So I, at the age of 44, I don't consider myself old, but I am in a different body than when I was 24, right? This body has housed a couple children and fed them. This body has had 20 cumulative years of wear and tear on it. This body is now in an age demographic where cancers are starting to pop up amongst my, cohort of similar aged people. So many women with breast cancer I know in their early 40s who are friends. These things are very real. My body is different at this age than it was 20 years ago, and the way that I need to take care of it is different. So what I got away with at that time, metabolically, with sleep, with exercise or lack of exercise, with pushing myself, is different than what I can get away with now in order to meet my health goals. Like, I can continue to make those same choices, but the consequences of making those choices is significantly different at 44 than it was at 24. We may ignore this ongoing because we think, yeah, but, when I was a resident, I worked this hard and, I did okay and was able to do this and that. But again, you are not at that age or stage anymore in your life. Things have changed. How are you living your life now? And how is that working out when it comes to your health? And think about your health very globally, right? Think about sleep. Think about movement. Think about where you are metabolically. Think about, your function, right? Do you have back pain? Do you have migraines? Do you constantly feel run down and sick? We can't continue to sacrifice ourselves in order to do this. Now, I'm not a surgeon, right? I don't spend 12 hours, on my feet in the operating room. If I did, I imagine that the way that I would need to take care of myself for those circumstances is different than what I need to do now in my life as a outpatient, clinician, right? They are different, but they are both important because I need my surgical colleagues to be able to do surgery, and I want them to be able to get really good rest and really good nutrition and to be able to find a consistent way to move their bodies so that they feel good before they operate on me or my patients or my family, right? I need that from them. But that is not what we prioritize in medicine. We prioritize people pleasing. We prioritize, just do more, just do more. Don't you want to take care of your patients? Don't be selfish. Don't be greedy. Be a team player. It's not working for us, and we need to do something different. So my ask for you is just to do the exercise of imagining a continuous cortisol monitor. What would it be doing? What would it be showing you? And if you were tasked with trying to reduce your cortisol levels, what choices would you make? Right? If you had that objective data, what would you choose to do differently? My hope, again, is that you would sit down with yourself, with self-compassion and kindness, be able to say, body, I love you. I've not been taking good care of you. And that ends today. I'm going to start to build habits that serve you, that make sure that you get what you need so that you can continue to do whatever it is that you want to do with this life. Yes, that may include continuing to take care of patients. Yes, it's probably going to, I hope, involve, spending time with loved ones. And it should also include spending time taking care of yourself. If you have to use the pull of I have to take care of myself in order to take care of other people, fine. That's a great tactic for people pleasers who are trying to, move into remission, as it were, trying to see that self-care is necessary in order to take care of others. I'm totally on board with this. But the point is that we need to start making steps. We need to see how taking care of ourselves, yes, involves pain and boundaries, and it involves some emotions. You are not going to start to do this work and not occasionally feel guilty or like you're being selfish because, again, your conditioning teaches you that you should feel guilty or selfish for doing this just because you've been socialized to do that. Okay, all right, we're going to have some uncomfortable feelings. Let's deal with that. But if we don't do this, if we continue to sacrifice our health, we are living into that narrative that being a woman physician is bad for your health. We are continuing to represent it, and we just can't do that. The future of healthcare depends upon us figuring out how to set limits so that we can stay in the game, that we can change the system, that we can find ways to care for ourselves in order to continue to be the badass physicians that we already are, but to do so in a way that doesn't break us. My friends, I hope you take this to heart. I hope you mentally will put your continuous cortisol monitor on. Again, if you patent this product, just give me a shout out. I give up the rights freely. I've said it out loud, right? You can have it. But let's just acknowledge what this tool could do for us in order to be able to have objective data so that you and your scientist brain can't logic your way out of understanding that your self-care is so incredibly important. My friends, have a wonderful, hopefully short week, and I'll see you next time. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.